Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam and today I'm going to give you my October wrap up. Everything I read in October plus a little bit of a TBR for next month. Now I know it's a little bit late in November now, but I was very busy at the end of October and the beginning of November going back to the UK to see my brother for his 30th birthday, which was excellent. And I came straight back into work and rehearsals, so I'm absolutely exhausted and yeah, I just need to get this out before I have gigs at the weekend, and then I'm going to take another little break before another video comes. So yes, just a little update that my life is crazy at the moment, which is fine because it was been sedentary before, so happy days that things are exciting now. But anyway, yes, I'm going to talk about the books I read, which was 3 books. Now, I know that's not many compared to a lot of YouTubers. I really don't understand how people can read like 10 books in a month or even more. I'll never know that. Like 4, 5, 6 is kind of my average, but it was only 3 this month. However, they were chunky. The smallest one being 500, the biggest one being 1,230 or something, very big book. So they're all, you know, pretty weighty, and they were all fantasy this month, which is not always the case because I love my sci-fi and sometimes read outside of genre fiction. But anyway, with much further ado, let's talk about what I read. So I like to do my wrap-ups chronologically, and so the first book I read was The City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I did do a full spoiler-free review of this book earlier in the month, so I'll put a link for that in the description where you can find out more, and I will try my hardest to keep this brief, which is very hard for me, but I'll try. So this was a reread for me. I read it last year in the summer, but my book club that I run here in Reykjavik decided to read this book, and I was very happy because I thought a reread would benefit me, and it really did. There's a lot of things that I forgot. It's a kind of a complicated book, which I'll talk a little bit about shortly. But this is basically an occupation fantasy dystopia. That's a lot of words. It's a fantasy book set in a completely different world, and we focus on one city, Ilmar, in the country of Telmark. Now, this country has been occupied for the last few years by the Palatine sway, which is basically like an analogous British Empire. So they're trying to take over the world and instill their philosophy of perfection into everybody that they can. Basically power-hungry bastards. So yeah, the dystopia comes in because we're looking at the people who have been occupied against the occupiers and how their lives are basically downtrodden. But the main story of this book kicks off quite early when an event in the mysterious woods that are by the city, one of the highest members of the Palatine sway enters there trying to find other worlds to take over because you can never have enough power. And he dies. He gets killed by the dangers within the forest because something that he was supposed to have on him to protect him was stolen. And it just kicks off this chain of events trying to find this artifact and find out who basically caused the death of this big guy. But the chain of events causes there to be an uprising against the occupiers, against the Palatine sway. Now, one of the things I love the most about this book is the world building, which is interesting because it's only set within one city, but the city is so well realized that it just feels amazingly real, amazingly believable. You have so many different sections of the societies within the city, both from countries outside and the country itself, and different factions of resistance against the Palatine. It just feels truly alive and full of characters. To be honest, I spoke about this in my review. The city is what feels like the character of this book. But another thing is the narrative structure. It's quite a difficult and different narrative structure. I believe it is third-person omniscient, and it just has a lot of short, snappy chapters. And you only get a repeat point of view by page 120, so quite late in the book. So we're flitting around different perspectives the whole time because the focus of the book isn't just about a few characters, it's about the city itself and how it works and all of the different parts that make it up. And I just found this a really intriguing and interesting way of telling the story. A lot of people might bounce off it, and it does kind of make it hard to follow at times because you're not just grasping onto a few people. But if you're interested in, really deep world building and a different narrative structure, it is really fun to follow. And yes, I just highly recommend it. So if you couldn't tell, I found this book fascinating. It's not for everyone, but it is for me. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed all the thematic work that was involved in it as well, obviously to do with occupation and freedom, those kind of things. The plot was a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of pacing, but I just loved all of the characters, even if we didn't spend a lot of time with them. The world is amazing. Execution for me of 8.5 and enjoyment of 9, which averages out at an 8.75, a really good book. So the second book I read was The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne, book 2 in the Blood Swan trilogy, the third book of which came out recently and I'll be reading very soon, little hint for my TBR. And I started reading this series as a read-along in the Brothers Gwynne Discord, although I haven't been chatting much recently because I've been very busy. But also I'm going to be in a discussion video with led by Philip Chase with a bunch of other awesome people, and I cannot wait for that. But a brief description of the series and how it started is this is a Norse-based trilogy in which the old gods are rising back up. There's mysterious events going on where babies are being snatched away from their parents, and it all centers around finding out what's going on with this. I don't want to say too much more because of spoilers, and obviously this is a book 2, so I can't speak too much about the plot of this book. If you do want to know more thoughts about the first book in the trilogy, The Shadow of the Gods, I did a spoiler-free review, so I'll put that in the description as well. But this book, did it suffer from middle book syndrome? The classic thing that happens in a trilogy where the second book is the weakest. I don't know. I don't think so. I think I did prefer Shadow of the Gods, but this was still a rip-roaring ride, just like the first one was. However, I do think the pacing drops a little bit. There is kind of some setup for the final book, and that's kind of natural in a book too, so I don't begrudge it. But also, because it's John Gwynne, it's never going to be completely slow-paced and boring, because he doesn't know how to write boring books. That's just not a thing that he does. Yeah. So I really enjoyed the pacing of this book, and it was just always exciting. As you would expect with a second book, it is a lot more of a continuation and setting up for the finale, but again, never boring. And it has the classic structure of John Gwynne, where we have slower moments of building up character and lore and getting you attached to these characters more, with endings of chapters that are just really fast-paced and full of action that keep you gripped and wanting to read the next chapter. He is so good at that. I must read one more. This book has that in spades again, but we really build up the lore in this book and the world building. Things become a lot more epic as the dead gods rise up and become a big part in the big battle that is obviously coming. There are humongous scenes with huge implications in what's going to happen in the future. And it also has kind of a cliffhanger ending as well. So another interesting thing about this book is the increase in perspectives. The Shadow of the Gods only had 3 points of view, which isn't that many for an epic fantasy series. But this, we get 2 more points of view in Bjor and Gudvar. Now, Gudvar is a sniveling little shit, so it's kind of interesting to see his point of view, and you just kind of hate him, but you realize why he's doing stuff, and he's actually kind of sneaky clever, which is really fun to watch. And you get the perspective of Bjor, which really adds a lot of layers of moral greyness as he fights to decide what he actually believes in. So it's really fun to see someone who is a potential antagonist, but is he really? We don't know. It's not that clear, which is excellent to see. But the moral ambiguity is cranked up in this book, and it is just a big part of what this series is about. There are no easy answers in this world, and people are struggling to come to terms with what they should do, what they think is right, and that is a huge theme that John Gwynne explores to perfection with real nuance. And also, as always with John Gwynne, a lot of the themes about relationships and found family, and he just does it again and again, builds you up, builds up the relationships, takes some of them away from you and breaks your heart, but there's always a feeling of hope and love. So my rating for Hunger of the Gods, I'm going to put it a little bit lower than The Shadow of the Gods. Still excellent, but I do love a start of a series, and The Shadow of the Gods was amazing. This was amazing. I give it an execution of 8.5, enjoyment of 8.5, so 8.5 altogether. Really good second book in a series. The next book I read was The Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, book 4 of the Stormlight Archive. I read this on Kindle because my hands were just getting too tired reading those tomes. So yes, I read this digitally. And this is obviously difficult to talk about, talking about a 4th book in a series. But I would say that I actually enjoyed it a little bit more than Oathbringer. Now, this is usually people's least favorite in the Stormlight, so I am just bucking the trend because I'm so damn cool. Yes, I preferred this to Oathbringer only just, but to me it just felt like a normal entry in the Stormlight Archive, and I'm going to address some of the qualms that people have. So a lot of people say they don't like the flashbacks in this book. If you don't know about the Stormlight Archive, each book has a set of flashbacks of one character, and the character flashbacks change with each book. Now this one is described as Venli's flashbacks, which I find misleading because it's not just Venli, it's also Eshonai. So the two of them, we get a lot of their flashbacks. And so if you don't know anything about Stormlight Archive, these are basically considered antagonists on the wrong side of the fight. So I found that actually super interesting to see from this other side, from the antagonists' point of view, because I always find that interesting. And I feel like it gave a lot more nuance to the antagonists and let you know more about what they are fighting for and why they are fighting, and how maybe they aren't actually the bad guys. And yes, like I've said about Hunger of the Gods, it introduces a lot more moral greyness, a lot more questions. Nothing's just clear, no one is just obviously the hero, and I love that. However, the biggest complaint I hear is about Navani and the tinkering with Fabrials, because there is a lot of focus on this technology and the increase in the technology and what they can do with it. And they say that it often reads like a textbook. And to be honest, it does. It's kind of dry, dull, a little bit boring at times. I definitely found myself drifting off when it got too sciencey. You know, this magic system is very sciencey, like a lot of Brandon Sanderson's magic systems. So I understand this complaint. However, the implications of what she is doing and what she finds out are humongous, and it's really expanding the lore within the series and answering a lot of important questions with humongous implications for the future, and that's what I found exciting. Yes, the boring science bits were tough to get through, but what they meant were huge, and I just found that actually really gripping. I think my problem now with the Stormlight Archive is I think Brandon Sanderson just put too much into it, too much lore, too many different magic systems, and having the characters know absolutely nothing about it at the start, it just feels like too much to learn. Even though the books are so large, I just wish that people knew a little bit about something, because you constantly just drip feeding information to the readers over these books. And in so many different ways, so many different magic systems, all the history, the different parts of the history all over the world. It's just, I feel stupid when I'm reading these books, because I just forget so much and I forget what is important. It's not easy to remember everything when you're just being drip fed. And, you know, it will mention something in one part of the book and it won't be till way later that you hear anything about it again. So yeah, I just find it hard to really follow what is important. I don't know if this is a me problem. It probably is, because I can be stupid and I have an awful memory. But this is just an issue I'm having with these books. I really wish that we knew a little bit more. But anyway, let me know what you think about that, because yeah, but I think at the end of this book, we know a lot more about the world and about the history and what this might mean for the future. And I think that's what I really like about this book, is that we're getting a lot more answers. I'll briefly mention my thoughts on the characters. This will be especially interesting to people that have read some of the Stormlight Archive. Obviously, we start with Kaladin, the main guy. I really actually preferred his perspective in this book to the previous two books. I liked him in the first book, the second and third book, not so much. And I think it's because he kind of takes a little step back from the action. I'm not that interested in him being a superstar fighter hero and always winning. Like, I'm really not interested in that. So him taking a step back, becoming more introspective, it just felt more real to me. And then he had an awesome ending. So yes, I really thought that Kaladin took a step up in his character development in this book. Shallan, whatever her name is, I still just find her incredibly annoying, like so many people. I know that he's trying to explore mental difficulties, but can he do it in a less annoying way? Surely. Every time she was on the page, I just wanted to get through it as quickly as possible. The person I find the most compelling, there go my notes, is Seth. I really enjoy Seth, so I'm super excited that his flashbacks are going to be in the next book. I just find him really interesting. He's so different from every other character. I really enjoyed the Parshendi perspectives. I found them compelling and nuanced, and it's interesting to think what the hell is really going on. And I love the increase of importance within the story. Raboniel especially, she was an amazing character. Dalinar kind of took a step back from most of this book. He's only really in like the last 20% or something, but I think he might be my favorite character, and what he does at the end of this book is awesome. Anyway, that's enough of that. Overall, yes, I'm really happy that we're getting more answers. I feel like it is actually a really good setup for the next book. It was dull and overly long at times, just like most of the Stormlight books. So that does push it down a peg. I have my usual classic Sanderson problems. I don't really like his dialogue or his humor, but it was decent. It didn't blow my socks off, but it was good enough, and I'm excited for the last book. So I'm giving it an execution of 7.5, an enjoyment of 7, so averaging out to 7.25. So my book of the month was kind of difficult, even though I only read 3 books, which is great. It means I'm reading good books. But it was between City of Last Chances and The Hunger of the Gods. And the City of Last Chances just edged out The Hunger of the Gods. They were both excellent, but I really, really, really enjoyed this on a reread. So City of Last Chances. So I'm going to quickly whip through my TBR for November. And book number 1 is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. A dystopian book set in 2024, at least the beginning. And spoiler, I've already finished this. I finished it this morning. It is, already a week into November, so I have already finished this. And then coming up next is, which I'll start tonight, is The Fury of the Gods. As I mentioned before, this is the 3rd book and the final book in the Blood Swan saga. And I'm going to be reading this and talking about it with Philip Chase, Mike's Book Reviews, Patrick Leo, the brothers Gwyn, and John Gwyn himself. I could not be more excited. So this is coming up next, and I can't wait to see how this great series ends. I trust John Gwyn to smash it. Coming up after that, or during that actually as well, is I'm going to be reading the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, who is kind of the godfather of Viking mythology and stories and sagas. This is like the Bible of Viking stories, and I've read it before, but I want to read it again to be kind of super immersed in these Viking worlds before I do my chat, so I have a little bit more knowledge that is fresh when I do the conversation with those great people. Coming up after that, which I'll read on Kindle because I've been buying too many books, is Parable of the Talents, so following up from Parable of the Sower. And I did quite enjoy that, and I want to see how the second book goes. And I'm planning on doing a kind of review video of both of them when I've read this book. That should be somewhere over here. I might be putting my hand behind it. Anyway, carry on, Sam. Next is House of Open Wounds by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I haven't taken the price tag off. What a professional YouTuber. I'm super excited to continue this trilogy, and hopefully it will be just as good, if not better. And I'll be excited to read the third one, which comes out next month. That's already quite a lot of reading for me. Hopefully I can smash through those, and if I do and have a little bit of time left, I want to read Dying Inside by Robert Silverberg, a super chirpy sounding book, which is like a sci-fi classic, so I really want to read that. Maybe if I have time to squeeze anything else in, I might read one of the short Richard Bachman books, Stephen King, but that's my plans for November. Anyway, that's the end of the video. As usual, I've spoken too long. I try to keep these short, but I can't. I'm sorry, okay? But if you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and join my journey. Let me know what you read in October. If you've read any of the ones that I've read, what you thought about them. If you have any thoughts about what I'm going to read, just pop them all down there. I love talking to everyone. And for now, that will do. So goodbye and see you soon.